You're listening to Everything Out There with your host, Steve Stockton.
Hello, friends.
On the airwaves, Steve Stockton roams. Tales of ghosts and haunted homes. Through the static, weirdness flows. Mysteries in the dark, it shows. Whispered voices late at night. Alien beings out of sight.
Hey, everybody. Steve Stockton here with you. Everything out there on the Clyde Lewis Ground Zero Radio Network. Glad to be back. I've been absent for a couple of weeks getting over sinus something or other and whatever crud's going around. I could barely speak above a whisper there for a few days, so haven't had a show for a couple of weeks, but glad to be back with you. Thank you for tuning in. Again, everything out there. I'm your host, Steve Stockton. Joining me tonight, got one of my fans and friends of the show, also a New Englander, James O'Keefe. He's got some really interesting stories that he's going to relate to us. He sent me story after story after story, and I'm like, I got to get this guy on my radio show. And the stars lined up. He, like me, he's a new father as well of a son, and finally worked everything out. You may hear my baby crying in the background or his, either one. I was on a show here recently and being broadcast live. It was on terrestrial radio and on Armed Forces Radio Network, and also being simulcast on YouTube. And people in the YouTube chat was like, "Is that a cat? What is that? I hear a baby crying." So if you invite me, you get the baby too, and no extra charge. But anyway, let's go ahead and bring my friend on in here. James, how you doing tonight?
Good enough. Very well, very well. Thank you, Steve. It's an honor to be on your show, and yeah, it's good to finally get on here. I know we've been talking for a while, and yeah, just very pleased. We're all sitting in bed, and we've been huge fans for a while. We listen to you guys while we're going to bed, and we've been listening to your show for quite a while now. So it's kind of surreal to us, honestly. We're sitting here like kind of glowing about it, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're on here. So
yeah, I appreciate that. And a lot of people listen to it to go to sleep or relax or chill out. And that doesn't bother me, but I've had people apologize saying, I hate to tell you this, but I listen to you to go to sleep. Hey,
Yeah.
if it helps you, I mean, I've had people with chronic pain, fibromyalgia, PTSD, insomnia. If my voice helps you to sleep, then God bless you. You can always go back and listen to it again if you have to catch up and get all the way through it. I've put myself to sleep before recording for the YouTube channel. I fell asleep at the editing desk, so it happens. I just got one of those voices, I guess.
Yeah, you certainly do. You've got a fantastic radio voice, good narrative voice, definitely.
Well, thank you. And I love to tell stories. A raconteur by trade, so it is what it is. So anyway, James, just again, you sent me all these incredible stories, and I was going to record them. People that listen to my YouTube channel, Missing Persons and Mysteries, I have subscriber submitted stories where people send in their stories, and I record them. But these are so good and so amazing. I thought it would be best to have James tell them himself. So you can just start at that list that you gave me in any order that you want, however you want to do it. I'll give the floor over to you, James, and just, again, you give us a little background on yourself, and then off we go.
Okay, very good. Sure, I'll start with myself. My name is James Ryan O'Keefe. I was born in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, in the Pocono Mountains, but only lived there for a little minute. My mother's from Central Maine, and she ended up taking me here. My father followed me here, and I've been living in Maine since I was 1 year old rather. And I've done a fair bit of traveling, and I've lived in some other places. Traveled down to Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. My grandfather bought some land down there, and I've lived in Maine, kind of all over on the coast, in the mountains, rural most of the time, out in the middle of the woods. I'm not too people-y myself, but
Sounds like
so
heaven to me.
yeah, it's honestly really nice. The Western Mountains of Maine, like the White Mountains, are very, very nice. Yep, we've got a little bit of property out there that I bought from my family, and we're just starting to build our first house, and that's where some of these stories take place. But so yeah, I'm 32. This year I'll be 33, and so some of these take place like a few years ago, but I'm not really sure about the order, so I'm not gonna attack it in necessarily like in order specifically.
Yeah, doesn't have to be linear, just however you want to tell them in what order and to what
Sure.
extent. But they're all incredible stories.
Okay. Yeah, very good. I guess I'll start earlier on. So my grandfather, like I said, like I had previously mentioned, I'm going to take a little walk here. I do better pacing around, standing up.
I do that too. I was a kid, I'd be walking back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. My dad would be like, "What are you thinking about?" He knew me. He knew me that I was, if I'm walking and talking on the phone or anything, I still do that to this day. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
Make yourself comfortable, whatever works for
Yeah.
you,
Thank
brother.
you. Yeah. I'll wear a hole right in the floor. I do it all the time. Just thinking, talking about stuff, talking to myself, talking to my wife. But so my grandfather, um, he was the reason that my parents met was he had a construction company out in the Poconos in Pennsylvania, and that's how my mother and father met. My dad was working for him building houses, and my mother was working in his office. But so a little bit of backstory on that. But so he ended up buying a little piece near to Cancun in Mexico before like Cancun got proper established into a tourist destination. It was back in the 70s. And so he had a little spot down there, and but when he passed away, he didn't pay his bills, and the government wanted to take his property, so my dad had to go recover it. And so on one of his trips down there, and my mother got, or my stepmother, sorry, got in a bad bicycle accident, and she started having these bad seizures. She was really sick, and so living out in the Western Mountains of Maine, it gets really, really cold out here. Like the coldest I've ever seen was 47 below, and you could literally spit and it would freeze on the ground.
Wow,
And like,
that is cold.
you know, yeah, you could throw, I mean, door handles would break off the car. You could throw water into the air and it would turn to snow. Like it was very, very cold. So that was obviously just hard on her, like her metabolism and everything. Like she had a TBI, traumatic brain injury, from crashing this bicycle. And so they decided that, and it was just so happened to be at the same time that my grandfather was passing. And so dad had to go there anyway, down to Cancun area. And they figured that they were going to take a trip there just to get her out of the cold weather and into a nicer environment that was more stable, and kind of take her to the tropics like an extended vacation to heal her and get her brain right. And so they ended up liking it so much that they bought a little piece. It was slightly south of Cancun. He ended up selling that property, kind of tying up loose ends with the government, and ended up buying a what's called a palapa. But like expats back in the day, they would go there with their campers, and they liked it so much that their campers would be parked, and they'd end up building like these structures around the campers themselves. And that's what this was. And it got turned into a little gated community. So you'd have like thatch roofs, and the campers would be literally inside of the house, and you couldn't tell. But when you got inside, like a whole room, you'd open a door and it would be like, oh, is this a Winnebago in here? So it was really interesting like that. But
I've seen
mostly,
pictures of homes like that. That's amazing to me. And back in the day in East Tennessee, a lot of people would buy like regular house trailers, and then brick up around it, and you wouldn't know it was a trailer until you went inside it. But yeah, that's amazing. I'm sorry, continue.
No, that's fine. Yeah, you see them down south and stuff too. Yep. That's the other place that you see them in, like Louisiana. Yeah, Kentucky, I've heard of them being in and stuff. But so it was one of these types of scenarios, and there was all these campers there. But they ended up turning it into a sort of gated community with like a bunch of white people, a bunch of Canadian people, and expatriates. People from the United States would go there and they'd park their stuff. This is like in the late 70s, early 80s. And so he ended up being there, and they really liked it. So they decided to winter there. So they're snowbirds. They go there every year. They drive his diesel van he's been doing for a long time. We've been running diesel engines on vegetable oil since I was a little kid. So he's always been into like alternative fuels and like, stuff like that, trying to pay for stuff for cheap. But so they ended up down there, and I was going through a little bit of trouble in Maine at the time. And I got an invitation from my dad to go down there. He had been sending me videos and pictures of like how beautiful it was, these tropical birds in the backyard, and like, coconut trees in the front yard, and the ocean was right there. So it was just super pretty and really serene. And he invited me down. So I ended up taking him up on his offer and going down there for a visit. And one of the, I guess, like, I'm not really sure where to start this. So I ended up staying with him for some months, being down there. And then it was so like not authentic right there, because it was like most of the way I just wanted a more authentic experience. So he had a friend who was from Belize, and he was doing maintenance on the property there, and he spoke English. So, and his name's Ismail. And he ended up, like, I ended up meeting him and getting to know him, and he was really nice. And he invited me to go stay down a little bit further south, like, and more inland, more rural, and very much more authentic, like essentially a Mayan tribe that's in the middle of the jungle in between Tulum, Mexico, Yucatan Peninsula still. And where my dad was, just for the record, is Pamul, that the gated community place with the campers. But an hour south of that, that's how I found the spot. Was like, I was like, well, I like taking the Colectivo, which is like a bus that goes into Playa del Carmen, to go like skate and do different, go get a sandwich and like kind of see the area for what it really was. And sorry, I'm just like catching my breath. I'm like walking around. So I ended up talking to Ismail, and he invited me down there, further down, like an hour south of that. And it was a little village called Francisco Umay. And it was in between the ruins of Tulum, Mexico, and Coba, Mexico, which, like, Coba is ancient Mayan pyramid, and Tulum has ancient Mayan pyramids as well. So this is a very, very old area, and it's really steeped in, folklore and kind of like their version of witchcraft and wizardry. And there's all kinds of just different lore and like cryptids and all kinds of stuff like that. So I ended up going down there, and I rented like essentially a concrete room. It was called a palapita, and it was really, really cheap. It was like $20-something a month, and wow. The electricity was like $2 a month, and you could go next door and you could get like all kinds of food, like a whole chicken for 50 cents, and just like the cheapest. I was actually on unemployment because I worked on a lobstering dock, like buying lobsters and selling bait. So I was on unemployment at the time, so I had a fixed budget. Like I had money coming into my bank account, so I could just live down there for cheap on like nothing. And I went down there and I rented the spot right next to Ismail, and his family is his wife is named Marta, and she's Mayan. She's from the area. Her whole family's from Chumash, and she had been there for, well, as long as the Mayans have been there, essentially. And so I ended up renting that spot for, I think, 9 months. It was like 8 or 9 months. I actually sold hamburgers and stuff there. But so while I was there, like a bunch of different stuff happened. I'll just tell it as I remember it, I suppose. But it was really just heavily saturated with like these strange ethereal events.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
I said I love it.
Yeah. It was a really interesting time. I'll never forget it. So I guess I'll start with the scariest one, the one that really filled me with, like, I guess, absolute dread, probably the most afraid, which is kind of surprising because, like, if you hear my other events, and as you know, and we'll get to some of those, like, it was sort of out of place fear. I was, and just like, I'm going to tell a little bit about what this place looked like. There was one road that was paved out in front of a bunch of palapitas, like these little concrete buildings. It was pretty much one room, and some of them would have a separate shower that was out back. and it was open. It only had cold water. There was no hot water because it was so warm out all the time. And there would be water storage tanks up on the roof that would like gravity feed the showers and stuff. And behind all of the houses, there was like a row of houses, these palapitas. And there was just jungle for miles and miles and miles. And it was really, really thick and all kinds of wildlife and just very, very rural. And so I would be smoking. I've always smoked cigarettes, and a lot of weird stuff has happened while I was smoking, actually. But so I would be smoking cigarettes out behind this place, like facing the jungle at night and going into the night and just kind of like, enjoying the scenery and listening to the birds and the monkeys and the different things. And I would experience these little rocks getting thrown at me, and they would hit the roof, and I would hear them. They're just like tiny stones, no bigger than your pinky nail or so. And I could hear them like hitting the cars around me. There was cars parked in the gangway, sort of like between the houses, and they would hit the roof and kind of like pitter patter down the roof, and they would like land at my feet. And I didn't really think too much of it for a while because I thought it was like, I don't know, a piece of like wildlife, like a bird that did that, or maybe, like a monkey that would be throwing stones like that or something. And so this would happen for a period of like, it was weeks at least, if not months, before I ever mentioned it to him. But one night, so I'm laying in my hammock, which splays across the whole room. And I would tie like a cord up to a window. It only had one window and two like big, think like sliding garage doors, like as if it was like a retail spot where they have like those security doors that slide all the way down, one in the front and one in the back, one facing the road and one facing the jungle out back. And so I would be up late at night, and it had one door. I'd have all the doors open. Or I'm sorry, one of the jungle side door open, the big garage door, my side door open with just one window, like right beside that. And then the roadside door all the way closed. And I'd be sitting in my hammock, pulling myself with this cord back and forth really, really late at night. And rocks would skip from the door to the back, the back jungle door underneath my hammock, like all night, like periodically. Wow. Just every 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, it would be like, like underneath me. And you could see them, you could hear them. They were very tangible. They were it wasn't like an ethereal thing. It was like, they were very visible. You could pick them up and touch them. Some of them would not go all the way outside. I never saw anything that was throwing them. I never saw anything doing it. And the houses were so close on that side that there couldn't have been a bird. Like, it just didn't make any sense at that point. That was when it started to sort of escalate to where like, it was like, okay, this is weird. And so eventually it progressed from happening really only at night. It would be like only at night or at twilight that it would start, these like tiny rocks hitting off the roof, hitting off the walls, hitting around me, hitting my feet, or like coming really close to my feet. And this would be happening for weeks. And then eventually it was they started happening closer to the daylight. So it was like happening in the middle of the day or late in the morning, or just, it stopped being secluded to the nighttime or near nighttime. And when I finally started to ask Ismail, my neighbor, and they lived right beside me, this little family, it was Ismail, Marta, Brian, and Salami. And he was from Belize, so he spoke English, Mayan, and what do they speak in Belize? Spanish. Yeah, Mayan, traditional Mayan. He spoke because Marta, his wife, spoke Mayan. And he spoke English and he spoke Spanish. So he could talk to all of us like at the same time, essentially. But when I finally mentioned this to him, I was standing out, and it normally happened out back, the rock throwing thing. Well, one day I was out in front, and it was in the middle of the day, and I was just kind of minding my own business. I forget what exactly I was doing, but I saw this rock, I kid you not, in midair, like chest level, a few feet away from me, maybe 3 or 4 feet away from me. And I noticed it. It was quite clearly a stone hovering in midair, this small stone. Wow. And as soon as I noticed it, it hit me in my chest, as if someone was standing there that you couldn't see, holding this little rock and they just pelted me right in the chest with it.
Yeah.
And I observed this, and it fell to the ground, and I picked it up and looked at it and just kind of held it in my hand for a second. And I was like, okay, this is, very, very abnormal. This is to the point where now I know that this is not an animal. I literally just saw this thing in midair hovering. It was just so crazy. So at that point, I wanted to talk to Ismail about it. I was like, okay, that's enough for me. I'm gonna mention this to somebody. And so I go to Ismail and I tell him basically everything I just told you, like the whole, how they were being thrown at me. It's changed from at night to during the day, and just like that whole works of it, how long it had been happening. He's asking me questions too. He's like, how big are they? Like all like this. And he's like, oh, and he starts getting this concerned look of like, like he knows what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
He didn't think I was a freak. What'd you say?
Yeah, one of those looks. I've run across those before, where that knowing nod.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. He knew exactly what was going on. He told me to wait right there. He pulls up a chair. He's like, Jim, you're gonna want to sit down. And he pulls up a chair for me, and he pulls up another 2 chairs for him and her. And he goes and gets Marta, and I'm sitting there waiting for him. He comes back with her, and she didn't speak any English. She did. She understood some English, but she didn't want to speak it because she was shy, And he's telling her everything that I just told him and relaying to her like what I had said, and she's telling him stuff I don't understand Mayan. So he's like translating between the two of us, and he's like, this is basically in her words, like, Jim, you are experiencing an event from, these are little people. These are tiny invisible people. They're like knee high. They're called the Alux. And they're like ancient sprites. He didn't call them that. He called them little people. So to me, that means like sprites or fairies or whatever, but that's not what he said. He said little people. He said these are little invisible people, and they've been here a long, long time. They're part of witchcraft. And she says like brujeria. I know a few words and stuff. She's saying that it's witchy stuff. And she says that she's going to make me some food as an offering. She says that I'm being told that I can't be in the land, that they're disrespected by my presence because I'm not from there, and I need to give them something, or I could be really, really hurt or disappeared. And she starts talking about her uncle that had actually been disappeared by them when she was a small child. The Alux are well known in that area for being for tormenting people and doing different things. They make you defecate yourself to death, is what they were telling me. Like they work on dehydration. Like you'll puke or go number 2 so much that you'll actually die. And she said, if you ever see one, you're not supposed to see them, and don't listen to anything that they say. She was actually saying, he was saying on her behalf that I had made out well as far as that stuff goes, and that it was early on in the beginning, like that I was lucky that I told them when I did, because it could have and has been way worse for different people. And they like to attack people when they're drinking, actually, because you're like in a state of how do you say, like you're susceptible to that, to like the ethereal world.
Mm-hmm.
But so she's telling me that she's going to make me some food for them, and that I need to leave them tequila, and that she's going to spread salt around my entryways to my doors. And she does this, and it works. I never had another stone, anything happen to me. It just completely stopped after that. And she made them mole, in case you guys are wondering. It was a mole sauce. She made them like a tiny plate. She left it on a tiny plate, and she left it outside. And actually, none of it was gone. I was half expecting it to be like completely gone. That would have been really trippy. But it was still there in the morning. It just, those experiences never happened again. I would sit in my hammock and never do anything, or like it would. None of those rocks ever came under my hammock again, and it just completely stopped. So, but they said I'll go a little bit more into it because it's really interesting. And I ended up doing a lot of research on that after, because that was the first time I had heard of it. And she says that her uncle got disappeared, but he was talking about them throwing tiny rocks when she was a young child. And like a couple weeks later or sometime later, he was just completely gone. They never found him. And he would drink a lot and sit in his hammock out back near the jungle. And he had mentioned, like, because she knew exactly what I was talking about as soon as, and she called them chiquitito piedras, like tiny rocks, you know? That's basically how you say tiny rocks. But so he ended up completely disappearing. They never did find him. He was just gone. And I guess that's what they do to people. They will like interdimensionally trap you. God knows what they're actually doing, but they're not considered benevolent. All of the Mayans consider them malevolent. They're not a good force. You're not supposed to listen to them. If you're hearing their voice, they're getting, it progresses like as you go. Like they start affecting the material world around you, but then eventually if you don't do anything about it, or if you don't give them any offering, if you don't abide by their rules, which are like really hard to, you need to know somebody. Like if I didn't talk to them, it just would have been, I would have had no idea what to do. So I was actually really lucky that they were there. But the Mayans really know them. They know exactly what was going on. And like everybody believes this stuff.
It might have been one of those missing persons that I cover. I've got a series of videos about the missing and the Fae theory that dovetails perfectly with what you're talking about there. And that's in a lot of the Native American cultures too, about these little people that like to do terrible things to people, to humans.
No, it's an absolute fact. They really don't like boots. They don't like shoes because they consider them dirty. That's my grandfather really believes in fairies too. He's from Ireland. My last name's O'Keefe. He's from County Cork, Ireland. We have a family crest and castles over there. There's an O'Keefe Castle in County Cork, Ireland, to this day. But yeah, my grandfather was, especially like at the ending of his life, he would often talk about fairies to my dad.
Yeah, it's like a religion in those Celtic countries, the Fae folk and the fairies.
Well, it's just so weird how it's intercontinental. Like, how do you explain that? All these different cultures that go back thousands of years, and like to not give that any kind of credence is just a mistake. Like,
absolutely, I mean, I agree, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to explain that. How would these people all know to contrive the same lie at the same time about the same thing? And so intricately, like it's just real. It's as simple as that. Yeah, and he would often mention that they don't like shoes, and that was one thing that I heard from you. I was like, oh man, that exists. Another like Steve's talking about how they don't like shoes. They think they're dirty. My grandfather used to say that when I was a tiny kid. Yep, but so anyway, I kind of forget where I was. That was a little bit of a sidetrack, but yeah. So come to find out, this is an interesting part about it. The Alux. So the Mexican government believes in them so much that and it's there actually, right? Like to this day, I believe it's still there. I was there a few years ago. It might be gone now, but I know it was there for years. It was a tiny house that they ended up building for them. They often require like structures. They want houses, they want food, they want liquor, they want wares, they want places to live. Like at the Cancun airport, they built an overpass and it just kept falling down. It fell down 3 times, and they brought in people like what are they called? Engineers to come and figure out the problem as to why it was falling down, and they couldn't do it. They didn't know why. It didn't make any sense. It was supposed to be physically impossible that it would fail so many times. So they kept rebuilding it. By the 3rd time that it happened, they brought in a local Mayan shaman to identify what was going on, and he said that they had pissed off the Alux. Oh, sorry, I don't know if I can I swear lightly on here?
Yeah, you swear lightly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No F-bombs and stuff like that. But so they made the Alux upset. They had taken this ancient land for their own gain, and they didn't pay respect to the tiny people, essentially. And so he said that they had relayed to him that they wanted a tiny house, that you guys are going to take this land and not give us anything. Well, they were mad. So we want a tiny house, or your overpass will just keep falling. And so they did. They built them a tiny house, and it's a little tiny concrete palapita. It's about like 3 feet tall, and it's under the overpass. And as you're leaving the Cancun International Airport, it's still there. It's there. They left it there. And lo and behold, the government paid for all of this, the Mexican government, and it worked. The overpass never fell. And this was in national news. This was in the paper. They published this whole story.
In Scandinavian countries, there's been cases where they built a highway around an outcropping of rock other than blowing it up because they feel that the little people, the gnomes or trolls or whatever there, lived in there, and it would upset them, and then they would have all these accidents and things on that highway. And it's like you said, it's cross cultural. Native Americans, the Cherokee have those legends. Out west, when I lived out there, the Navajo have those legends. Up here in New England, the Algonquin have those, and it's just it's all over the place. How can it not be real? Like you said, how could a lie be so coordinated that people across eons of time have the same stories?
No, yeah, it's damn near impossible. You can't fabricate something like that. There really are little people that are invisible, that are benevolent and malevolent, but it's best to just stay right away from them. Don't invite them. That's like when I see. I didn't know the Algonquin had stories. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to look more into that. But I always see little fairy houses that people make out here, like on nature trails and stuff. And me and my wife walked past and we're like, "Oh, that's a mistake. Like, don't do that. don't invite them. Don't make them stuff. Don't encourage them. You know." And so there's a lot of folklore about that, especially Irish folklore. Like there's a lot of stuff. You know more about it, but but anyway, that's an interesting side trail to the Alux. She told me this, and I started looking it up, and like lo and behold, there's government funded documentation of literal structures that engineers built that they couldn't find out why it fell, and the only reason that it stands now is because they appeased these tiny invisible people. Like, how strange is that? And it's in the paper and it's in the national news, so very, very interesting stuff. Yeah. So, but that's just one of the, and I'm glad that it ended so lightly, because she said that, I mean, they'll provoke you to walk into the jungle. She said, don't listen to anything that they say. They can sound like your family. They can sound like your friend. She was telling me all this stuff about it in Mayan, and Ismail was relaying to me, but basically just don't listen to them. Like, if something seems off to you and it doesn't quite make sense, then leave it alone. Don't listen to them. And she said it was a very specific procedure to get them to stop, which I'm super grateful for. The tequila with the mole and the salt. There's something ancient about salt too. That seems to be cross cultural as well. Like, where salt has this ethereal property to it. But so that's basically the ending of that. But I had a few things that happened at that same spot, and I'll if you don't mind, I'll just jump right into another one.
Please go right ahead.
Yep. So in the very same place, I'm sitting in my hammock really, really late at night. And this one's pretty scary too. And I think I actually crossed up like the most dreadful one. I meant it to be this one. I just got confused there for a second. But so the scariest one is definitely the dragging of the chains. I'm sitting there in my hammock, and it's probably 2 or 3 in the morning, like really, really late at night, and everything just kind of goes quiet. And there was this dog that was chained up out back. It was Ismail and Marta, Ismail's family's dog. He had only 3 legs, and they saved him. He was chained up out back, just to give you context of the situation. And so I'm sitting there in my hammock, and everything goes dead quiet. And I had just started to notice, and that's really, really rare. Even 2 or 3, 4 in the morning, you can hear birds, you can hear little animals, pittering around. You can hear stuff. Nothing. It's never really quiet there. You're in the middle of the jungle. There's all kinds of wildlife. So it was really odd to me for a second that it would be so quiet. And I started getting this weird feeling. And then all of a sudden I could hear this very unmistakable chains dragging, like as if someone had these like big chain lengths of a thick gauge dragging them behind them on the tar from way down the street, maybe 100 feet away. And it just started like they were dragging them slowly. I didn't hear a person. I didn't hear footsteps. All I heard was like that crinkling, crackling shit, like as if metal dragged against tarmac, like that abrasive metal on tarmac. And very specific, like if you ever drag chains over something, there has a very specific sound, and it's very unmistakable.
Indeed.
I've worked in like heavy machinery quite a bit through my life. Like I worked on a lobster boat. I've worked on a dock. Like I've operated forklift. I've operated automotive tools. I've worked in the garage. Like I've worked with chains before. I know what chains sound like dragged across something. And this was pretty unmistakably chains to me. I didn't see it. I didn't want to look, but they started getting closer and closer and closer slowly. And as they got closer, I just started getting more and more and more scared. It was like just utterly terrifying, and everything else was super quiet. And these chains are getting closer and closer and closer. Everything else is dead quiet. And they actually, because my house was the second to last one on the right heading out of town. There were no other houses like for a while. Like it was another half a mile or so until there was a concrete structure on the same side of the street. So, and whereas you got to kind of like get the other knowledge of like, all right, so I know I'm not really supposed to be here. Like there's already these ethereal entities that like are displeased with my presence in this area. Let's like just kind of like accept that as a reality, you know, otherwise this kind of doesn't make sense. But the chains keep dragging closer and closer to me. They get up to the side of the building and they round the corner, and my window was facing that side. By this time, I'm closing my eyes tight. Like I'm not looking. And I have this overwhelming feeling of, because I almost thought at the beginning of it, within the first 20 seconds or so, I was like, what is that? And I was thinking about getting up and looking out the window and just seeing what was going on. And then I had this really overwhelming feeling to not do that at all. Like just stay where you are. Do not look at that thing. It was a very malevolent feeling. It was a very overwhelming feeling of fear, like of petrification, you know, like I was petrified. Just at the sheer sound of this thing, it didn't make any sense. And it doesn't really sound like it's kind of like you would have had to be there, but it was really, really scary. That was probably the scariest I've ever been at the sound of this thing. And it rounded, so it gets up to me, and it's like all you can hear. The sound is just deadening, like it's just chains, like it's all you can hear. It's almost in my brain of like how loud this shit is. And it rounds the side of the building, and I can hear the chain links like up against the corner of the concrete, and that made it extra real to me. It was just like such a specific, nuanced thing, and whatever it was, dragged them like around the corner of my building and in between me and Ismail's houses, like in this little gangway, this little corridor thing. And the dog, Dobus, his name's Dobus, just starts freaking out. He starts barking and barking and barking, and like really scared, like I've never heard him bark before. This thing gets up, I imagine, close enough to him to where I hear him barking, and then I hear him crying. Like you know, like how a dog would whimper. And then I hear nothing. And then I hear rustling of leaves and underbrush, and this thing just fades into the jungle. And my eyes are closed the whole time. I'm only using auditory to describe any of this, or like my eyes are pinned shut. I'm just like terrified. And I don't know how I went to sleep or when I went to sleep or anything regarding that, but I remember it being morning. And I went out and checked on, I went outside, and I remember it seemed like a really horrible dream, like it might not have been real, but the dog was gone when I woke up. Oh, so I went out and checked, and the Dobus was missing, and Ismail got back he saw me in the yard, and he was like, hey, do you know, like Dobus is gone. Like, do you know anything about, like, did you see him leave or anything this morning? I was like, no, but I did hear something really bad, and I told him, not all in that detail, but I was like, I heard something really strange last night, and it sounded like it like did something to him, like it sounded like chains. And it was that same look, man. It was that same like, oh shit, you know, like he was just like understanding. And so he tells me that Ismail tells me that Marta told him that was an offering that people do in that area, that witchcraft people, wizards in the area will drag chains to the moon at certain times of the moon cycle to do an offering to like gain power, essentially, for their witchcraft stuff. And she said to leave that stuff alone, like that I did a good job not listening, or not going out and engaging it or anything. And that it was, again, a malevolent like entity. She said it was a person. She said that they were people. Whatever it was a human that was doing an offering, and that they did drag chains like that. And that was what I heard. That's what she told him, and he told me that. So that's really interesting stuff. But the dog did end up coming back. He didn't end up completely disappearing, but he came back 3 days later. and he was covered in brambles and just like all cut up, like messed up from like it looked as if he'd been running through the jungle just like as fast as he could to get away from something.
Oh,
And
wow.
that makes a lot of sense to me because that's exactly what I figured that he was doing, you know? So yeah,
Stands
but
to
yeah,
reason.
just
Makes
super,
sense. Yeah.
yep, super scary. He came back 3 days later, and he was happy to see us and stuff, but he was all cut up. He was cut up from running through the jungle, and he had like brambles all over him and stuff. But it was good to see him because I was thinking that thing might have like taken him and eaten him or whatever, you know, something really scary. But it was good to see him again a few days later. So yeah, that's another example of you know, brujeria in the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. Very scary at times.
Fascinating indeed.
Could I jump right into something else in
Yeah,
that
go right
area?
ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Sure. So I had a Spanish neighbor from Spain, and he was building like this geodesic dome concrete thing that was close by. He was building this house for some Californian people, and I was talking with him about like the illusion and just those different like witchy things, you know, trying to find out more about it. I've always kind of been into this type of stuff of like trying to figure out, you know, ethereal things. And he was telling me one of his experiences while he was building his house. He was renting another palapita close by from a different man that was there, like a Mayan man who was there, who owned the place that he was renting while he was building this house. And he had a horrible nightmare in the middle of the night, and a snake. He had woken up to a snake that fell from the ceiling on his chest. And he mentioned it to the guy that he was renting the house from, and the guy starts asking him like, what kind of snake was it? And he's describing the snake, and he's like, that's impossible. We don't have a snake that can climb like that. They all like stay on the ground. So that tells me, and this is the guy that's renting him the house. He's like, you have to leave. I'm not renting my house to you. You are you're being infected by wizards. Like, you have to go. You're not allowed to be here anymore. So he actually had to find a new place to stay, because he was not in favor with the local brujeria. And the thing that tipped off the guy that he was, you know, his landlord essentially, was that this snake, it was an omen that landed on his chest in the middle of the night. Yep. So, and that was like a couple 100 feet away. This is all like a very small village, you know?
Yeah, very frightening.
So yeah, yeah, super strange. But I think that's about it from there. A little bit of some more like segues from the Alux is that, and the same guy, the very same Spaniard, we actually went on a walk. He was like, I was talking to him about the illusion. He was like, they actually have statues of them in the woods. They're ancient stone Mayan statues that are literally little people. They're about 3 feet high. They're tiny men. They're made out of stone. They're hand carved stone men, and they look like little men. And we went out to go try to find some, which was like not a great idea in hindsight. We didn't end up finding any, and everything went fine, so it was okay. But I just don't recommend that to anybody in the future. If you're listening to this, don't go do that. But so that's another aspect of it, and come to find out from a different source, because I ended up talking to a few people about this in town. And another person told me that, yes, there are tiny stone men out in the jungle. The Spaniard said that he had seen them. He was trying to take me to one, and we couldn't end up finding it. He didn't know where it was. He said it had disappeared. He was like, it was right here, but now it's gone. So theoretically, these things move. You know, that's another possibility, or like a strange side effect of it, is that like it wasn't there when we tried to go find it. And another person had said that they make those stone men so wizards now can go into them, and it's actually a part effect of people can go into the stone structures as like in conjunction with the moon cycle to make them animated. And that is part of the reason why the Alux exists, is because of like modern day wizardry. They have always been doing this. They've had like these you know. And actually, kind of what tipped me off about this, or that was interesting, was like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. That's like real. That's like what they're talking about. Is like you can have like a talisman that something can go into and become animated through that thing, or like access a different realm. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but that's what these people were saying. Was that you know, the modern day wizards go into these stone structures to make the Alux come alive, basically. And then they can do different things through the stone structures as the Alux, which really exists as people. But they need like a vessel of some kind to get
That's
here.
amazing. And just the thought of that is just mind-boggling.
It is really crazy stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep. Very, very weird. Very, very weird. Let me see. Like, I think I'm forgetting something about it anyway, but yeah, it was just a really strange time. And well, so, oh yeah, this is another crazy part of it. So there's these things called the Y-Peck, which means witch dog. Y means witch, Peck means dog in Mayan, in the Mayan language. And so this is another aspect of like wizards going into stuff, you know. They would go into dogs. They could become animals. They would typically be called, this is Marta talking to me, like we ended up talking a lot about this stuff because she wanted me to be safe. And she was like, well, you don't know like what goes on around here. And if you see this stuff, like stay away from it and know what you're doing, you know? And so Ismail translated a lot of different stuff for me, but it's kind of hard to recollect it all because it was just so much, but it was called the Y-Peck. It was basically a wizard dog, and it's humans that can go into animals or become animals. And what they do is they give you horrible nightmares of specifically animals screaming. If you're ever visiting the Yucatan Peninsula and you are like staying in the jungle in a hammock and you have this really bad nightmare of like a bunch of animals screaming, then you probably should leave, or you should talk to somebody who's local about what you should do, because that's a really bad omen. Yeah, that's a really, really bad omen. And actually, I had been talking about this to someone from Maine that was also visiting. And they had said that they were having these dreams. And that's how I originally found out, or like, well, in conjunction with that. So I was talking about like, oh, like what would make you, have these really horrible dreams of animals screaming? And Marta knew exactly what I was talking about again. But so it's the Y-Peck. But this ties into a different cultural aspect of children in that area. I was like weirded out because they were throwing rocks at the dogs. They were like little kids and like grown people too, but like adolescents and mostly little kids were kind of perpetually throwing rocks at dogs everywhere. And there's like packs of dogs down there. The dogs aren't really treated the same as like in the United States. People are dog crazy in the United States, as they say down there. Like we treat them way more like family. They treat them like animals, in the jungle, because they don't have the resources. There's just like a lot of cultural, socioeconomic reasons as to why dogs aren't treated the same. But so they're throwing these rocks at these dogs, and I'm kind of weirded out. Like, why are these kids chucking all these rocks at these dogs all the time? Like, what is the deal behind this? And someone from town told me that is because they want to identify. It's a cultural thing where they're identifying which dogs have wizards in them or not. So I was like, whoa, that's really strange. The dogs that are not afraid, that's why they're throwing rocks at them. So dogs that are just dogs, they'll run away from the rocks. They don't want to be hit with rocks. They're afraid of that. That spooks them. They go away, But the dogs it's so they know which dog to kill. It's so they know which dog has witchcraft in it, has a person in it, or is like in tandem with essentially the devil, like according to them.
Fascinating.
And so they'll identify them by throwing indiscriminately throwing rocks at all of the dogs, and whichever dog isn't afraid, they know that dog is a wizard, and that's why they do that down there. So that's another really interesting part about it. But these dogs, they come into your room at night, and they'll actually they'll try to sexually this is like for an offering purpose. This is like a ritualistic, wizardy purpose, like of, malevolent. This is basically so they can gain power. They'll, this is what they say. This is what the people say down there, that these dogs will go into a room of specifically a girl, and they'll lick their private parts, and they'll make them dream really horrendous dreams, and to get a, like magical force. They'll gain power from doing this. And so that's why they're like so against that. Obviously, like that's, not cool. So that's why they're throwing rocks at them, trying to get them away. So, but yeah, just like a lot of stuff. I think that's the last thing I have for down there specifically. But yeah, I mean, it's just really, really steeped in this. The whole culture. It's like you could talk to anybody about this stuff. nobody thinks you're weird for talking to them about brujeria down there. They all have a different thing to say. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg for the stuff that's going on down there.
Seems like the supernatural is just part of their natural. They don't really think of it in those concepts. It just is, and they're aware of it and somewhat, I guess, comfortable with it.
Yeah. Well, they sort of know better. Like a lot of them are very anti that. Like they're very careful and they know what to do about it, but they believe it though. And I think that on some level that makes it like way more real. Like it actually feeds that, like when I think it exists anyway, like whether you were ignorant to it or not. But since I had a feeling that so many people give it credence and so many people like are involved with just the understanding of it, that it is very like tangible down there. Like rocks can come out of thin air. I mean, that's not really something that like happens but it just seems so steeped. And so, cause I was only there like 9 months and just all of this stuff, it was like so many people had different stories and it was just so steeped in this culture. But yeah, very strange, very, very strange stuff. But so I'll exit Yucatan. And I'm sure that there's a lot more down there that I wouldn't really care to delve too much into or find out. But just that stuff was enough for me to get a little bit of
within 9 months to experience all that. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was really strange. It was really, really strange. So I guess I don't really know where to go from here. I could look at I think I have my notes on. But I mean, I'll just jump from one thing to another if you don't mind.
Yeah, just feel free. No, that's the best way to do it, and that way you telling your stories at your convenience and your own how you want to do it.
Very good. Okay. Well, I guess I'll go to where we are now. So we bought a little piece of land in western Maine. It's just outside of Farmington, Maine. It's a place called Temple. And it's located up in the mountains in the foothills. We have like a little stream. It's a lot of trees. It's a lot of old growth trees. And it's very quiet. There's like 300 people in this town. And we're building our house. And I had been staying in my camper van conversion while before I met my wife and after, like we lived in it together actually for a little bit. And I was buying this land and we were building this unconventional structure to live in. We were building a house, but it was like strange. It was like a box and just some free materials, like repurposed materials and stuff. But I was camping basically on this land, and out back behind the land or on the land, there was a stream. And so I'm camping. This is before my wife in the house. So when I first had been staying there, and I was staying in my truck, and so I had gotten up one morning. And I saw a bald eagle flying over the stream, presumably hunting, just like a few feet over. And if you've ever seen them in person, they're huge. Like they're like 4 feet tall. Like it seemed bigger than me. And it was just amazing.
Massive. They're absolutely huge.
Yeah, they're super huge. And so I saw this thing and it didn't bat a wing. Like it just glided down the stream. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. And I went out to go see if I could see it some more. And I went to the stream's edge and I was looking for it, and I'm watching it fly down the stream. And I'm looking, and something catches my eye in the water. And I'm looking down and I see these two like gelatinous ball looking things. They're white. I see these two white things and they're catching the light. And I bend down to see what they are. And they're like cylindrical. They're like these two cylinder. They almost look like a scallop out of its shell. That's what I refer to them as, like a freshwater scallop. But outside of the shell though. So not a shelled thing, but it was like the inside of it, like it looked like a mussel. But they were perfectly cylindrical and they had this honeycomb pattern on the top of them. Both of them did. And they're just sitting there in the water like in a dead zone. And they're like kind of just floating there. And I pick one up. And they seem to be very like alive, like this thing. I thought they were like maybe a gummy, like a fruit snack that a kid from up the way might have dropped in the water or something. Like that was my first thought. I was like, oh, these are like a snack, like a fruit snack or something. And so I pick one up, and my hands had a little bit of sand on them, and it cut the skin of the thing. Like the abrasion from the sand particulates on my hands cut the skin on this thing, and it sort of like splayed open, like as if it was under tension, like pressure. And on the inside of it, it was pink. So it was like white on the outside, like whitish pinkish on the outside with this honeycomb pattern on top. And they were like maybe, a half inch in all dimensions, or in all ways, like a half inch tall, half inch wide. And so the sand cut the skin on this thing, and that's when I realized that it was very much alive. Like I was like, oh, this is like a living, like this is like an organism. So this thing's alive. And I didn't know why exactly at the time, but I had this overwhelming urge to eat it.
Oh,
So
you're braver than I am.
Well, yeah. In hindsight, 2020, do not do that. Don't be eating mystery stuff. Like this is not an endorsement to eat mystery fungus in the water anywhere. But so I ate this thing, and I ate the other one too. And I didn't really think too much of it. It was just like, oh yeah, that was good. It tasted like a mussel. It tasted kind of like a scallop, but like not salty. The consistency was like an ocean critter, like a shellfish of some kind, but no shell on it. The pattern really freaked me out too, because lo and behold, like come to find out, I was asking some people, my neighbors in the area, like what this could have possibly been, and none of them have ever seen anything like it before. They didn't know what it was. Someone mentioned that it might have been a freshwater scallop, but basically I can't find any evidence of these things ever existing or anybody who knows what they are. So to me, that's very strange. That was like another ethereal thing. Some of these things happen to me, and as we'll like go kind of more into the stories, like some stuff happens to me and I don't really realize what's happening at the time until later. Like where I'm looking back and I'm like, no, that's like I was in a different place or something. Like something was strange there. But I don't exactly notice it like as it's happening. It takes me a little bit. So yeah, I ate these two scallop things that like don't even exist, and I like to think of them as as like tokens of life, because like shortly after that I got married and we had our baby, and so to me that's what I would like to refer to them as that. Like I endearingly refer to them as like a good omen, like a relationship was like a magical version of my relationship, like in another place. That was a physical manifestation of my relationship with my wife and kid that happened shortly thereafter. Indeed. And it was like a good sign.
Yeah.
At least that's how I'd like to refer to it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's your story. If that's the way it affects you, the way you feel about it, then that's what it was as far as I'm concerned.
I think so. Yeah. Thank you. So that's it. Yeah. And a few things I've had. So that's in Temple. That's where we're located now, like where our house is at now. And a few things have happened there. So, but there's that one, and then this one's really actually kind of scary. So, before that occasion, the mystery scallop occasion is what I call it. I had slightly down the street before I had gotten over to that land. It was the same piece of land, but it had to be subdivided. Like I bought it from my dad, and I had to have it surveyed and stuff. So I wasn't like staying there. There was no power and stuff there yet. So I was staying down the street, and still in the same van and stuff, and I only had my dog, so it was just me and my dog. And I would periodically leave her like tied up. If I had to go talk to a neighbor, I have some neighbor friends there, like a mechanic neighbor friend, and I would maybe go talk to him about something if I needed something real quick. And like they're good neighbors. I might go borrow some sugar or salt or like something like that, bring somebody a beer or something like that. And one night, and it is nighttime, and it's during the summer, and it's really, really, really beautiful. It's serene out there. It's like very, very green, lots of trees, really open, mountains in the background. You can hear the stream if you pay attention, and there's like lightning bugs, and you can see the stars and everything. It's really beautiful. And so I have the dog tied up for a second while I was over talking to my neighbor, and I come back and I let her off of her hook, and the side door is open to the vehicle, and it's facing the back fields. There's like this field in the back where I was staying at. And she just immediately bolts, and it was a full moon on this night, go figure. And so you could see like 30, 40 feet away to the edge of the field. You could see all around you. It was pretty light. And she immediately just barks and bolts. And this dog, she's a little pit bull. She's not afraid of anything. I've seen her chase moose. I've seen her, she'll try to chase anything. She's very super protective. She'll try to chase a lynx. Like I've literally watched her chase a moose into the yard, out into the woods. Yeah. And she doesn't listen when she's on a tear about something. I'll be screaming at her to get back, and she just doesn't. She's on his ass. She's trying to figure it out for sure. But so she takes off running at something, and it takes me a second for my eyes to adjust. Like I was looking at the light because the light was on in my truck, and I let her off the hook, and she immediately bolts and takes off after this thing. And I look towards that way and I'm yelling at her like, Ivory, no, no, no. Cause I thought it was like an animal, like a wild animal. And I'm always worried because she's so tiny. I'm worried about her getting like got by a lynx or a wild cat or something like that. So I'm yelling at her to stop and I'm looking towards where she went. And my eyes are adjusting from the light in the truck to the backyard, to the moonlight. And I think I see her, but it comes forward like probably 10 feet or so. It's maybe 20 feet away from me. And it comes forward about 10 feet. Like it splits the distance between me and it. It was like really terrifying. And it comes straight at me. And I realize that it's not my dog at that point. And I'm looking at the thing and my dog is gone. Like there is no more dog. The dog is gone. And I'm looking at this thing, and the best way I can describe it is it's just it looked like a propane tank. It looked like a propane tank floating off of the ground, like maybe 3 feet. You could see the shadow from itself, like casting the light from the moonlight, like it was casting a shadow underneath itself. It looked like a stand-up 100-pound propane tank, like it was like cylindrical, and it had a rounded top and a rounded bottom. And it came forward and my dog was gone. And it just like, it scared the hell out of me basically at that point. And I'm looking at it and the best way I'll describe it the best way I can. It looked like it had skin, honestly. Like, you know how a propane tank in the moonlight, it would look like it has a sheen, like a metal sheen on it. This did not look like that. Like it looked like it was wearing like leather. It looked like it was wearing like a gray leather. Like it looked like it had skin, like human skin.
Yeah.
It was really freaky. So but it came forward a little bit and then it pans right. By the time that and the sides of it were all like holographic looking. Like you couldn't quite identify exactly where the edges of it were, but you knew it was a cylinder. On the edges, it was like blotchy, like as if it was like a hologram, like it was like not quite coming through all the way. So that was a really interesting feature of it. And it was so visible that it was very, very tangible. What you could see was very real. Like it looked like you were looking at like a literal propane tank floating in the air. And it was maybe 5 feet tall. It was vertically oriented and it panned right. So it was like in a U-shaped driveway with this field in the back. It panned right, but in a semi arc, like as if it kept going, it would have made a complete circle around me. Like as if there was a perimeter or something that it was following. And it seemed to keep itself facing me, which was the other really scary part about this. Like it's hard to kind of describe. Like it faced me the whole time, even though it was moving in a semicircle. It didn't move. Like its face, what would have been the face of it, the same side that was facing me, kept facing me. So it moved in tandem with, like, in relation to where I was at, which was really weird. That's like a very strange aspect of it. And it stayed oriented perfectly over the ground. This was like generally flat. Nothing was moving. It didn't have legs. It didn't have arms. You know, there was nothing to identify that this was like an animal. And I know what animals look like. I've grown up in Maine my whole life. Like we've been hunting, you know, like I've skinned deer. I've killed deer. Like I know what animals look like and I know what they don't look like. This thing was a floating propane tank with human skin, basically, you know, or not human skin, but like skin with no hair. And it was gray. It was like a matte gray propane tank, like 5 feet tall. This thing was like it looked like a living spacecraft. Like it struck me as if it was alive. Like there wasn't something inside of the thing. It was like an organism, you know? And it's just like a weird feeling to have. Like I know I kind of can't really claim that because I don't know that, but that's what it felt like. It felt like it was like not a craft, but it was like a living thing. And so my dog's still gone at this time. Like it pans right, it does the semicircle thing, and it goes out the driveway, and that's when I lose sight of it. Like it's gone at this point. And at this point, I'm cursing it. I'm yelling. Like I'm pissed. Like I'm screaming at this thing. Like, you're not allowed to be here. You have no, because like I'm not religious, but I do believe in Jesus and I believe in God, and I do believe in the occult, and I do believe in the ethereal. So I'm cursing this thing in the name of Christ. And, you know, I'm telling it that it has no authority and it's not allowed to take my dog. And I basically think that it stole it. Like it stole Ivory. My dog's name is Ivory. I think that it stole my dog and that it was like trespassing and doing something malevolent that it shouldn't have been doing. And the reason that it made the semicircle to me was that it wasn't allowed to get any closer to me, but it could take my thing. Like it could take my thing because she wasn't bound in the same. I'm not exactly sure, but I started cursing this thing in the name of Christ. And, I'm like screaming up at the stars. Basically, I'm yelling at the sky, and I look down, and my dog is right beside me, almost under my feet, with her tail between her legs, like looking as if she never went anywhere, and she was there the whole time. And I put her in the car, and I get in, I put her in the truck, I slam the door, I get in the truck, slam the door, and like we spent the rest of the night right there. And I talked to a bunch of people. I was like, I just saw the craziest shit I've ever seen. And so yeah, that was basically it. I mean, that's the end of that story. But I mean, the thing that got me is amazing. Like when she bolted after, because dogs don't identify stuff that's like not there. You know, your dog isn't gonna have a shared hallucination with you. Like your dog's gonna point stuff that's there. You know, I mean, they can sense things that are in the ether for sure. Like when they look at the corner and it's all weird, or they're growling at something that you can't see or whatever. That sure, that's there. But when they point and run and bark at something, they're seeing something. So to me, that means that this thing was really there. It disappeared her or whatever. It like interdimensionally intercepted her, however you want to say it, and then it put her back. You know, it didn't take her. So she ended up right at my feet. But yeah, that was very strange too. That was right down the street. A few things have happened at that same place. That was very strange.
Wow.
Yep.
What on earth do you think something like that was? Floating on-in propane tank with a leather jacket. You know, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know.
I get it. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff out there that we don't know, that we can't explain, that exists beyond this realm.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I can personally vouch for that up and down all day. Yeah, really an interesting third hand. I typically don't like third hand encounters because it's like, oh, he said, she said type stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But one of my favorite third hand encounters was a friend of mine that he was talking about. He was on a hiking trip with his buddy, and he had gotten up to, his buddy had stopped. And so he looked at his friend and he noticed that he had this perplexed expression. He was staring up into the air, and that's how he noticed this thing. And it was he said it was just an outright spaceship from the 50s with rivets. And that's the thing that really stuck out to him. And it was floating without a sound, not moving, 20 feet up in the air. And it had a man inside of it. And with a glass dome, like picture like a 50s UFO, just like the most stereotypical UFO you could think of, with like a human man inside of the thing. And he locked eye contact with them, and it disappeared, he said. He said that by the time that they saw him and made eye contact, it was gone. Like, and they didn't know what happened. It was like he realized that they were there and just like flipped a switch and just poofed himself out of existence or something. But he said that it was so close, and what really stuck out to him that made it really like tangible and real was the rivets on the craft, which I always like that story. That's like my favorite third hand.
Very interesting detail there.
Yep. The rivets on it. I'm trying to think of other stuff too. I mean, there's just so much. Yeah, let me think. What did I cover? I got babe, do you know any more? Oh yeah, the baby crying. That's right. Yeah, that's a freaky one. So I'll jump right into that one. On the same property, my wife, she mentioned she got this feeling all of a sudden that she was like feeling icky and that she wanted to go like take a bath in the stream. And so we would stay like up and building the house and stuff. And she would go down the way and take little showers, little baths in the stream. And she got this feeling all of a sudden, and I could sense that like something was weird. I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm all right. I just got this, I just don't feel good." And so I'm gonna go down the way. And I was like, "Okay." Didn't really think much of it. And she got back, and that was like totally fine. Nothing had been outright, wrong at that point. And some days later, she told me, as if like it wasn't very important, that she heard a baby crying, a human baby crying, just outside of the stream, like off into the woods. And where we are, there's no houses like that. Like you can't. I have neighbors, but they're on the other side, and they're not where she would go to, like a private place. And there's just like miles of woods on that side of the stream. But she said that that's where the human baby cry was coming from. And so that's another little short one for out there. Yep. And she said that she got a feeling that she should just ignore it, and so she did. which was funny to me. Like she knew innately to leave it alone.
Yeah, there's nothing scarier than a baby crying where there's not a baby, and
Yeah.
I've covered cases like that where people would be hiking and hear a baby crying, like coming out of a cave or
Oh
from
yeah,
deeper
no,
in the
that's
woods or something like
terrifying.
that. That's a mimic or something. No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And there, who knows what would be doing that? But I mean, anything that's doing that is probably you can cross it off the list as being benevolent. I don't think that there's nothing good is going
Yeah,
to do
even
that.
if it's a big cat, they claim that down south, what they call black panthers, that they
Uh,
can mimic a baby crying to try to lure you where they can capture. But either way, a baby crying in the woods, if where there's not supposed to be a baby, is not something that's time to go the other
no.
way.
Yeah, exactly. That's too specific in that case as well, because like we had recently realized that we were pregnant too, that she was pregnant, and so it just seemed kind of specific, like in regard to her situation as a person, too. Like, oh, you're gonna be whatever this thing was that was trying to get her to like engage it. Knew what to talk about, like knew what to like spark her interest to get her to go further into the
Yeah,
woods.
go for that
So.
maternal instinct.
Oh, and the deer. Oh, yeah. Was that at the same time? I'm talking to Doreen too about it. Was it? Oh, it was a week later. Yeah. So, a deer. I don't know if this is like in relation to that. That's super scary, right? And the motherly instinct thing. Yeah, exactly. So like a week later or so, a tiny deer, as if had just been born, like it still had like blood on it, like it was wet. Like it had like fetal whatever liquid on it. I'm not sure how to explain that, but a tiny deer that was just born walked up to her in the middle of the stream. She just looked up and this tiny deer was standing looking at her from like a couple feet away. So that's, I mean, I don't know what type of omen type thing. And she could have just honestly saw it, so it didn't have to be like an illusion type thing either, but just strange events for out there. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other stuff too. I have, Steve, do you mind if I take a little break?
No, let's go ahead and take a break. Meet back here in just a few minutes.
Okay.
If I get back first, I'll wait for you. I'm going to play an ad and play some music from my friend Lee G, and we'll meet back whenever you're ready.
Okay, awesome. I'm just going to pull up our conversation through Messenger so I can go through what we already have.
Okay. We'll
to remember stuff. So.
Okay.
Okay. I'll see you then. Yep. Thanks. Bye.
Attention all Ground Zero fans. Aftermath.media is celebrating our 4-year anniversary with a spectacular deal just for you. For a limited time, you can get an Aftermath Premium yearly subscription for only $79. That's right, just $79 for a full year of exclusive content, ad-free listening, and premium features. Dive into a world of incredible stories, top-tier journalism, and the best in entertainment. Whether you're a longtime listener or new to Ground Zero, this is the perfect time to join the Aftermath family. Don't miss out on this amazing anniversary special. Visit Aftermath.media today and sign up for your Aftermath Premium yearly subscription at just $79. But hurry, this offer won't last long. Celebrate with us and elevate your media experience to the next level. Aftermath.media, the ultimate resource for parapolitical and paranormal fans. Visit Aftermath.media and subscribe today. That's Aftermath.media.
And that's Lee G from First Floor Audio with Shutters. Steve Stockton back with you here. Just hanging out. Looks like we may have lost our guest. I'm waiting for him to pop back in. But in the meantime, in the interim here, I want to be sure and invite everybody to check out my YouTube channels. I have several, but my favorites are, of course, Missing Persons and Mysteries, where I just what it sounds like, so it does what it says on the tin. Let me message my guest here. And the other is Tales Untold. That's where I do some immersive storytelling. So check that out and let me know what you think. Also, I have books available on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold. If you just do a search on Steve Stockton Books on Amazon, let's see, you've got National Park Mysteries and Disappearances, Volume 1, which is the Great Smokies, Volume 2, which is part of California, specifically, excuse me, Yosemite, Joshua Tree, and Mount Shasta. And Volume 3 is the Pacific Northwest, covering Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Also, I have my perennial favorite, Strange Things in the Woods. And that's was the first book, the one that really started all off for me. The stories that I collected, a lifetime of stories, that one. And then the autobiographical My Strange World, which is personal paranormal experiences. So we're waiting for James to come back here, and we'll continue with these amazing topics. And while we're waiting for him, okay, just heard him pop back in. Okay, there you are. Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. I'm just coming back in myself. I just did a little bit of business here, talked about my YouTube channels and my books. So pick up where we left off there, James.
Sure. Yep. I'm going to. Apparently I can't go into my notes to remember, so that's okay. I got a brief overview of what I was going to talk about anyway. Yeah, I can't go back out and exit back in. But okay, so on another occasion, this takes place in coastal Maine, like in between Blue Hill and Orland, and I was with a girlfriend of mine at the time. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Sound great.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I was with a girlfriend at the time, and we were driving up the hill from the Orland Big Apple there, going to Blue Hill. And she pulls over, just like I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm looking out the window. I'm not really thinking too much of it. And I'm looking outside, and I'm just kind of gazing off. And she starts to drive slower, and she pulls over to the side of the road. And she stops, and she's looking out the driver's side window, like facing into the woods, and she's just looking into the woods. And I say, like, what's going on? Like, what are we doing? And she goes, I just saw a big man, like a big hairy man. And I was like, what do you mean hairy? Like hair all over him? She was like, yeah. And I was like, naked? Like he was naked? And she said, yeah. And I was like, how do you know it was a man? And he said he was huge. She was assuming that he was a man because of how big and muscular he was. And I said he was covered in hair, and she's like, yeah, covered in long blonde hair. And at this point, I'm kind of putting two and two together, and I'm like,
I see where this is going. I love it.
Yeah, I was like, well, we should probably get going. Like, can we, you should get back on the road. Like, let's get out of here. And she does, and she gets back up to speed, and we leave. And so that was really interesting to me, because like, she didn't say Bigfoot, and she's not really into that type of stuff. Like she just said she saw a huge hairy man cross the street in front of her. I was like, where did you see it? She's like, right back there. I was like, well, she said that it crossed the street. It was a large hairy man with long blonde hair all over his body. He wasn't wearing clothes, and he crossed the street and went into the woods, and it just like really struck her and perplexed her. And she pulled over to try to look at it. And to this day, when I would bring it back up, I'm like, remember when we saw that Bigfoot? And she doesn't think about it that way. She just refers to it as the hairy man. And she was like, not really. I was like, how do you not remember it? Like, to me, that's really strange, because I definitely remember it. I remember the conversation. I didn't see it because I was looking out the passenger side window. But she said that she remembered us having the conversation about it, but she didn't remember seeing the actual figure, which was odd to me, you know. And I've heard of people like seeing really strange things like that and then forgetting, or like they have like a traumatic, you know, response to it. It gets stored away
like a block or something. I've had that experience. I've been with someone. We both had an experience, and then they kind of didn't remember it, not at least not in the great detail that I did. And that's just strange to me. I reminded me, remember that time we saw this? Like, no,
Yeah.
I don't really remember that. And like, you don't?
Like,
how could you not? It was like a defining moment in our teenage lives. The guy, a friend of mine, we saw like some kind of weird thing in a lake. Looked like a turtle about the size of a Volkswagen. But,
a
he
giant
didn't
turtle.
really remember it. Yeah, how could you not? Yeah.
Yeah, that was what's strange to me too. Like, right, I definitely remember you telling me that you saw a giant hairy man cross the road and go into the woods with no clothes on. That's, you know, how could I ever forget that? So she didn't remember it though, and I would bring it up years later, and she'd be like, "Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I still don't remember it." So that was always odd to me. But so I only have a few more that are off the top of my head anyway, but. So at another occasion, and this was when I lived in Waterville at the time. I had a little apartment building when I was a teenager, and I rented this place with a bunch of my friends, and we were packing this little apartment building out. And there was people always over and stuff like that. I'd be outside smoking a cigarette at this house party, and it was at nighttime, and I'm smoking a cigarette out front. I'm by myself, no one else is there, and I start to hear this hear and feel this really low tone vibration. And it seems like it's coming from underneath me and around me and like through me, like as if you were standing next to a big subwoofer with music on, but you couldn't hear any music, you know, like where you can feel the vibration of it.
Mm-hmm.
And where I was trying to, because I thought it was maybe coming from the road. And so I would try to go closer to it, but then it would stop. And so I would stop, and then it would start again. And if I moved, it wouldn't happen. But if I was completely still, it would happen. And as I'm standing like in this weird kind of awkward position in the driveway, two friends come in that were also going to the same event. They pull in the driveway, and they get out, and they're talking. I motion to them, and they kind of see that like something's up with me anyway, that I'm like in this weird position, like in a listening pose, you know, in the driveway, standing still. And I tell them, I'm like, shush, you know, like stay right there, like don't move. And I'm asking them, like, do you hear that? And they're both out of the car, and they're like, yeah, what is that? I was like, I have no idea, man. Like, I was like, if you move, it goes away. Like, try to find it, you know, try to walk around a little bit. And they did. And they said that it did go away, but we could all hear it. So we all just stood in the driveway, listening to this thing it sounded like it was coming up out of the ground. It was really low pitch, like, whoa, coming up out of the earth. And yeah, if you moved, it went away. And if you stood still, you could hear it. And then it just faded and got lighter and lighter and lighter until it disappeared. And, you know, we never did figure out what it was. Yep. Strange thing. Hello? Steve? Hello?
Sorry about that. I had my mic muted and didn't realize it. Yeah, that reminds me of the Taos hum in New Mexico, and then in the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle-Tacoma area. There's a hum that they hear up there. And there was another place in Oregon, I can't remember the city, where there was a hum. It was, you know, like jarring people's houses. And
oh, yeah, the Om. Yeah, I've heard of that too. Yeah, in Arizona.
To account for it, yeah.
Yeah, that's really strange. Like, who knows, man? You know, there's all kinds of subterranean civilization stuff, and just like all, you know, who knows? There's so much different things. But yeah, so that's really strange. Close to there, this is one of my ending ones, or I think maybe the last one. Close to there, not in the same apartment building, but in another building slightly down the street. I was by myself, standing out front in the yard smoking again, and I just noticed that this is in the middle of the day. That other one was at night. This is in the middle of the day in the summertime, so it was really, really bright out. And I'm looking and I see this. It looks like a sparkler beaded curtain dripping fountain of like light coming out of a slit in the air, and it looked like it was flowing water, but like sparks, like really, really bright, like electric sparks coming out of this like a hole, essentially, like a cut in the air, and it was coming out of this and stopping before the ground. And it was in the shape of like a curtain or like a door, and they were flowing from the top of this thing down, and it was very, very bright against the daylight. It was very, very visible. And so, yeah, another like very unexplained thing. Like I have no idea what the hell that was either. But
strange. And then there was one more that you'd sent me, something about a thrift shop, and I don't remember the details, but I remember it was fascinating.
Yeah,
we'll finish
that
up with that
weird.
one if you need to go.
Sure. Yeah, I think that might be the last one anyway. Yeah, the thrift store, that was super strange. So me and another girlfriend, we're taking our rounds around Bangor, Maine. And we ended up in this little thrift store. It was like a used good place, and the guy in there was super strange. So we're looking around, and she has her dog out in the car, and that's why she ends up going out to check on him for a second. But so he sees us, and we're talking to him, and he seems like kind of a weirdo. Like he seems deep, like his eyes are doing things, and he's sort of a strange dude. He seemed nice enough, but he shakes both of our hands, and he says that we both have really healing energy. And he kind of looks at me, and he sort of gives me like a secondary look of like, oh, but there's something up like with you. And he waits for her to go. Like in hindsight, he waited for her to leave. She says she has to go check on the dog, so she leaves for a second. And he tells me out of nowhere, he's like, so I'm not allowed to say much to you in front of her because of them. And he points upwards, and he's like, do you know what I mean? And I said, yes. And he goes, you are being protected by an old Native American spirit called Tall Pine. And that you and her are not going to the same place, and that there is a child. And he asked me if I knew what he meant again. And I just said yes, like kind of just to keep the conversation going, like I didn't really know at that point, like what the child part meant or anything like that. But just his reference to they, like I can appreciate that. There definitely is a they, a tangible, ethereal they that exists. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the tall pine thing was interesting to me, specifically a Native American spirit called Tall Pine. And I've been trying to find out like what that could mean or who Tall Pine is. And I haven't found out yet, but I'm interested. I would like to know. And I haven't seen him again after that. She came back in, and he just stopped talking about all of that type of weirdness stuff, and didn't mention it again after that. Yeah, it was odd.
Well, that's a strange story. Well, James, I think we've about reached the end of our storytelling session here. But I want to thank you again for being my guest here. This has been fascinating. Thanks for all the stories that you sent me and for us being able to get together. I'll send you links so you can listen to this when it airs. Any parting words for the people out there? Anybody you want to say hi to or anything?
Oh, nobody in particular. Just thank you and your family, and congratulations on your new baby again. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And it's really cool to talk about this type of stuff with somebody who's non-judging and is open to these types of things. And I really appreciate it. Sure,
my pleasure. And just the experiences that I've had, I listen to people because I know there's things out there that cannot be explained. Now, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Everything Out There. On behalf of James and myself, this is Steve Stockton. Telling you, we'll see you a little further on down the trail. Tell your animals we said hi. Good night, everybody.